Hey, everybody. It is Monday, April 11th, and I'm going to tell you about Elon Musk and how his move on Twitter is very different than what you're being told in the media, and certainly very different than what you're being told on social media. So, when this was announced, I went on Facebook and I said, this is not going to have any impact at all because what Elon did is he had bought under 10% of Twitter's common stock. That doesn't give him any power. It doesn't give any votes other than he could turn around and resell the stock. And that was pretty much it. At this point, he becomes sort of an influencing voice. Twitter obviously will, maybe listen to him a tad bit more. But when he announced that he was going to join the board, I thought that was a big mistake because there are 12 people on the board of Twitter. Elon would be a board seat, so he'd have the swing vote, which isn't really a swing vote, right? Because you can go 6-6. So unless it's a 7-5, and he was the vote, he's just one of 12 people as far as an influencer. And unless he plays the role of the guy from 12 Angry Men, the original, and he's the most persuasive person in the entire world, that board's already stacked with assholes that are going to be against free speech. If those people had any sort of ethics on free speech, if that were actually a goal of it, they wouldn't be where they are right now as a platform. And Jack Dorsey, who apparently was more of a free speech advocate than I knew, wouldn't have left. But that board is stacked with people that clearly don't care, including the president, who came over from India and has made it very clear that his role is not to enforce the First Amendment. So Elon would have been checkmated in the following way. He wouldn't have been able to use the stock that he had over top of Twitter because now, as a board member, he's culpable for potentially harming other stockholders. Just to explain to people what that means, when you go onto a board, you sign contracts that stipulate certain behavior. You actually are responsible as a board member for everything that happens in the company. So all the weird stuff that's been happening with Twitter up to this point, and mind you, they are government protected, so there is some safety there. But all the human trafficking, all the stuff that they're allowing with Russia and with ISIS and Al Qaeda, all that sort of stuff that's happening with Twitter, all the porn, child porn, everything else that they don't stop, that would have potentially fallen on the board members, if they knew about it and didn't do anything about it. So not only that, he would have been restricted from owning no more than 14.9% of the company of Twitter. And when you're a board member, it only covers a certain amount of your legal responsibility. So usually there's $1 million plan, but for a Fortune 1000 company, maybe it's a $10 million of responsibility. Maybe they got the big boy plan and it goes up to 50. But very rarely does it go much higher than that as far as your responsibility. So he's in a position. If he had taken that board seat, he would have been checkmated, meaning he wouldn't have been able to sell his stock because it would have hurt the company, and that would have made him personally liable for hurting the stockholders while in a position to affect the company. So the stock would have been not a leveraging point. He wouldn't have been able to buy a majority and do a hostile takeover of the company because he would have been capped at 14.9%. And I'm pretty sure once he saw the terms and conditions of the board seat, his lawyers and Musk looked at that and said, "There's no way I'm going to do this. It's not worth it. Being one of 12 is just not worth it. It's not going to make any difference." So he did the smart thing. And so I was saying this the whole time: this isn't going to do a thing if he goes on the board. It's literally a waste. They have him more checkmated than he has them. Now it's interesting. So now that he's pulled out of the board seat, he can do whatever he wants. He can sell the stock and help crash the Twitter stock, which of course, he'd lose some money, but it's already raised the stock quite a bit. So he's already made money. So I would imagine he'd do okay on that front. He can use his position to buy more stock. He could actually buy out the whole company as much as he could. Some people might not sell their stock, but again, it's common stock. So he could execute a hostile takeover. He could threaten to do these types of things. And Twitter actually has to take him a hell of a lot more seriously now than they did before, because you've got a guy worth $256 billion or whatever obscene amount of money it is, who's really making a point here. And he's actually been really funny on Twitter. He's one of the best trolls that's ever existed. And now I'm starting to actually think he really was doing this for a free speech thing, and it wasn't just a ploy. When he was going to go as a board member, I was like, yeah, this is a joke. Now I'm starting to take it very seriously. So he was on Twitter saying, should we lose the W from Twitter? Childish joke, but I love it. So he's out there messing around where it would be called titter, and I'm like, in my head, I'm going, Elon, you might not want to act like such a child. Some of those board members might start hitting on you. Those guys are the people at Twitter aren't exactly known to be the best people in the world morally or ethically, and they allow some weird shit on that platform without doing anything about it while kicking off information they call misinformation, which clearly hasn't been proven to be very true information given the benefit of time and being able to look back. There's a lot of accounts that are kicked off there now for telling the truth. So we've got a situation now where you've got one of the richest men in the world. He's in a position of power. He owns the common stock. He could sell it. He could crash it. He could buy more. But he has a lot more leverage as a free agent than he does on the board. People that thought he was a majority owner. He's not a majority owner. He's their largest private stockholder. Largest public stockholder. So you've got a guy who owns 9 point something percent of the stock, worth a ton of money. They've got to listen to him, because he could affect the price, and now he can sell anytime he wants. Everybody that's on that board that owns stock is benefited. He's got more leverage now than he ever would on the board. And in the meantime, that board wasn't going to do anything anyway. I think he might have been able to get as far as the edit button or possibly to get the Babylon Bee back on there. But that's pretty much it. It would still be the same thing where they're just shutting down free speech left and right, which is pretty dangerous because it is kind of like a public square, public utility. That's where we talk. That's where we do things, just like YouTube. But there's a sort of dystopian thing going on where they're starting to really clamp down with the arbiters of truth. And unfortunately, those people are not being honest about what's true or not, or else we wouldn't be having these discussions. It's much better if you have the better ideas just to go ahead and talk about them publicly. If your ideas stand up in public, somebody else has better ideas, they can come over the top and win. And if your ideas are better, then you can, put your points across in a way where you can affect and influence people. But to shut all that down, that's not a good way to do things. It just tends to make things worse. In this case, we've got a madman billionaire who's now out there who's going to start advocating for free speech on Twitter. It's going to be fun to watch. He's already making it very entertaining. For those people that are like, oh, he's not on the board, nothing's going to happen. It's actually the opposite is true. There's more that can happen now that he's not on the board than when he was on the board. All he would have done is been the 7-5 vote on things that probably don't matter. Many of the things boards vote on have nothing to do with the policies and procedures of how the company's running online. Most of that stuff's run by the CEO, and the CEO has already put all his cards on the table and basically said he's not a First Amendment person. He's more of a fascist leader of a very powerful public square. So Elon's now free. That's great news for all of us. It should be fun to watch. And as more developments happen, I'll come back on and give you my take. Thanks, everybody. Have a happy day. We'll talk to you soon.